Then the first tribes of America. Some traditions and peculiarities of women's life surprised and amazed European colonists when they saw it. Moreover, these very traditions often seemed surprising and creepy. But let us be fair-minded and note that in many ways they were much more modern and respectful than colonists. And we are talking specifically about women in this episode. Let's talk about Native American women and the wildest things they did according to first colonists. The side of human history which is not commonly talked about. Sentiments about women. At its core, for the most part, the attitude towards a woman among the native population of North America was so striking that Europeans often said that this was from the realm of fantasy world. At a time when in Europe the fairer gender had pragmatically no rights, women in societies of various tribes in America actually occupied a dominant position and had a voice. For one example, an ethnographer of that time wrote, "The founding fathers of the United States, Franklin and Jefferson, not only admired the social structure of the Iroquois, but also borrowed many of its principles in creating a democratic system. In the union of Iroquois tribes, women were engaged in magic, religion, and men, social functions. A male chief was chosen by a women's council and could be stripped of his title by the same council of women. So in other words, the role of women in many of the Native American tribes was enormous. For example, an interesting tradition among the Kigabit tribe, in which men in general were afraid of women and panic. In this tribe, the rite of initiation of boys into men looked rather strange to the outsiders and creepy. The young man had to sleep with the oldest representative of the tribe. Moreover, the completion of marital duties took place not by the initiative of a man, but by the initiative of a woman. There were cases when, exhausted by the harassment of women, men simply ran away into the jungle and hid in a specially equipped shack. When the number of fugitives reached several people, women sent special expeditions to find men, return them to the tribe, and oblige them to perform their duties and please their women. By the way, the Russian colonists, we are talking about Alaska in this case, indicated that they were surprised by the standard of beauty among the women of the Tlingit tribe, whom the settlers called Kolishami. The fact is that the women of this tribe used truly unconventional decoration for a Russian person. Tlingit women inserted a special small ring into the incision on the lower lip, kalushka, which made the lips stretch and sag. Family customs. In the majority of the original tribes of America, families were monogamous, but polygamy was also allowed. This was allowed when a man was able to provide necessities for not one but several wives. Moreover, among the wives were captured slaves. Interestingly, if the official wife satisfied the spouse so much that he was completely satisfied, then the man could ask to become the second wife, the sister of his faithful wife. This was considered quite normal and even preserved in Native American tales and legends. Their sisters lived alone in the world. The first men they saw, not only in a dream, came down from skies and taught them agriculture, cuisine, spinning, and all the arts generated by civilization. So every one of us now has 2 wives. It is also interesting how the native population solved the problem of male shortage and birth control. A woman could be in the status of a so-called brief wife if she was not the first wife. Moreover, the status was maintained until she found a spouse. Such traditions, despite the seeming savagery, allowed women, firstly, not to remain in the status of an old maid, and secondly, not to be left without offspring. Because in those days, a woman without a child was considered an exceptional phenomenon, and this was a curse by all members of the tribe. But once again, the attitude towards marriage was almost modern. Young people were often allowed to live together for a while. If someone within the relationship was not satisfied, then there was no marriage. In other words, we can say that in the matter of such a relationship between the sexes, the Native Americans were ahead of their time by several centuries, if we take into account the widespread popularity of intimate relationships before marriage nowadays. After all, the traditions of civil marriage appeared in let's say, civilized society almost in the second half of the 20th century. One of the most prominent affirmation of the very reverent attitude of the local population of America to women is the tactics of the European colonialists. Realizing that a woman and native tribe is almost a deity, the colonialists often deliberately captured women in order to force the male half of the population to cooperate and end the war. In 1868, George Custer's regiment captured about 50 women of the Cheyenne tribe, and to free the woman, the men agreed to leave the territory and go to the reservation. What is astonishing is that the Sioux tribe of the women spoke like this: "We believe that a woman is much closer to Creator than a man can be. Women, because they give life, create it, are much more holy and spiritual beings than men. They are more important than men. Therefore, it's not something extraordinary that even the right to divorce was granted not to men but to women. For one instance, a man could return from hunting, and his belongings were put near the hut. This meant that the wife decided to show his faithful one the exit. The most captivating thing is that the man had no right to even be indignant. He was obliged to take his belongings and return to his mother's hut without a single word." Let's add that some Native American tribes considered it mandatory for the husband to live in a hut with his mother-in-law for at least 2 years. And also, the man was obliged to ensure normal childbirth. That is, in accordance with the tradition, a woman had to give birth with a break at least once every 4 years. If the next child appeared after 4 years or more, then such a man could bring upon himself the displeasure of the rest of the tribe. Thanks to the real equality within societies, women not only ran the household on an equal basis with men, but also often acted as fearless warriors, which also amazed the colonists. Again, remembering the regimental commander George Custer, it should be noted that he was knocked out of the saddle during the battle by a woman from the Cheyenne tribe, named the Buffalo Convoy. Though there were not the most pleasant beliefs and traditions in relation to women, the tribe's people believed that during special days a woman is considered unclean and has no right at this time even to be near men, especially during meals. There is even a legend that a certain man named Usaka specially sprayed his grandmother before the meal and forbade her to eat, citing the fact that the old woman is now unclean. In addition to that, it was considered forbidden for a woman to hide this specific process, because according to the beliefs of the Native Americans, if an unclean woman eats with everyone, then she brings outrage on the whole family, shortening the lives of its members. In a matter of fairness, it should be noted that the reverent attitude towards women to a greater extent characterized the stationary tribes of the Native Americans. Among nomadic tribes, the very way of life implied a more scathing attitude and often even cruel. Let's take a deeper look at this matter. The nomadic tribes did not believe that a woman was a full member of the tribe. Despite the fact that they had the right to vote and the choice of the leader, it was believed that women were the same property as everything else. Women were simply obligated to take responsibility for the entire household, apart from that for children as well as their own spouse. In such tribes, older women were considered an outright burden and often even received less food than everyone else since, based on their viewpoint, why feed someone who is not able to give to tribe anything except her own presence? A rather opposing custom is the fact that, on the one hand, the original population of America was interested in a greater birth rate, and on the other hand, the people were able and actively used ways to reduce it. With the help of various herbal infusions and magical rites, the Native Americans of almost all tribes actively used abortion, without considering it something shameful or openly bad. And indeed, there is a reason for that. Often this was due to the onset of a difficult period, when hunters were not able to feed the entire tribe, and the appearance of new hungry mouths could only augment the bad way of how things are. Changes after decolonization. The appearance of the colonists on the new lands gradually began to radically change the attitude towards women among the native people themselves. Firstly, men, in order to receive some benefits or material privileges from the newly established government, introduced the practice of selling women and girls of their tribe or renting them out to those who arrived. In this case, no one was interested in the opinion and desire of the opposite gender. And it's obvious, and despite the fact that the right of renting wives was considered by the Native Americans to be a kind of analog of the establishment of good neighborly relations, and in essence did not represent anything out of hand. After all, we've got to admit that the rental of women for rent is a fairly dishonorable and wicked tradition. And by the way, both from the point of view of the time when United States just were beginning their existence, and from the modern point of view. Although from the point of view of the Native Americans back then, the birth of a child from a white man, a Native American woman was considered a guarantee of establishing mutual cooperation and also a guarantee of the security of the tribe. The Cree tribe even began to specifically reserve young women who were planned to be rented out to white colonists. By the way, many representatives of the colonists even married local women. And there was another paradox here. The opinion of girls did not interest men from the tribes, and on the other hand, it was thanks to marriages that diplomatic relations between the colonists and the tribes were established. Some of them argued that without the negotiation of tribeswomen, it was impossible to resolve any issue with the tribes at all. So here, in fact, the traditions of respect for the Native Americans for their own women merged, and the actual traditions of making peace by means of renting out their own women. So look, the conclusion can be made quite unsightly for a white person back then. Until the colonists appeared on new lands, simply breaking the traditional value system of the original population of North America, the Native Americans were not allowed to live in the same way as the colonists. The Native Americans were not allowed to live in the same way as the colonists. The woman meant much more to most tribes than even today in various societies in the modern world. We hope you truly enjoyed watching this episode and found it not just entertaining, but also educational. In case if you did, subscribe and leave a like.